Hey everyone, it's me, Henry Barajas. You are watching Contrary to Henry. Um, I call it Contrary to Henry because back when I used to work at the Tucson Weekly, I was an online editor there. So one of the things we had to do was just be quick and publish stories. And one of my favorite stories I ever got to work on was the closing of a local restaurant, which is not, I mean, that is a bad thing. The fact that a restaurant closed down is bad. Did not like that. Wasn't a fan of that. But the mysteries surrounding whether it was closed or not was fun. So I had posted, this restaurant is closing down. And the restaurant took to Facebook and was very adamant that they were still open. However, their doors were chained closed, and so the sheriff wouldn't come in and you know close the place down. And on their Facebook page, it said, "Contrary to Henry Barajas, we are still open." And it became a thing for people online to or in person. If they would see me, they'd give me a hard time and say, "Contrary to Henry Barajas." So that's where "Contrary to Henry" comes from. And I couldn't think of anything clever, honestly, to call this. The sad part is I parade as a writer, as a creative person. So I should have done better, to be honest. But that's fine, and here's the thing about podcasts. I had one called Redcon like 13 years ago. It was called the Comic Book News Podcast, where we talk about news, and I interview some really amazing people that I'm still friends with to this day. Um, I think what happens is if your heart isn't in doing a podcast every week consistently, people are just gonna forget about it. So there is no like set schedule for this. Um, there is nothing really. I do this when I have time. I do this when I want to do this, and when I have something to say, or when I have something to promote, like Helm Greycastle, which is coming out April 28th. Hello, Kayla. Thanks for watching. Um, so that is, what I'm working on. I'm working on the next issue. I'm sure who my guest, the one and only guest, maybe this time, because last time I said I only had one and only guest with Tony Fleece, and the artist like popped in, and we should have invited the artist to begin with, and I didn't this time. I'm not anti-artist. I love artists. I think they're all great people and very important to the comic book medium. So we'll hopefully maybe do this again and have whoever's drawing this next comic on with my guest, Julio Anta. Julio, good to see you, my friend.
Hey, Henry. How you
Hey,
doing?
buddy. I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, I'll say this. I really enjoyed that story, contrary to Henry.
Ah, you did. Good. I'm glad you can hear it, because I don't know if you can hear what I'm doing or
Yeah, no,
saying
I
on
could hear
here.
you, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Good to know. Thanks, dude. Yeah, I mean, I think you and something I think a lot of people in comics don't have is a life outside of comics. I
Yeah.
mean, you're coming in this in your 40s, right?
30s. We'll take it down a notch. Not that dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, you've had a life outside of this.
Yeah.
Your first new series, Home. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Your monthly series, which I've told you off air on the phone, should have been an OGN, but I think that's one of the things I want to talk to you about was
Yeah.
growing up. You go to the I don't know about you, but going to the comic book store once a month to get your comics. It's a
Mhm.
monthly ritual. Maybe sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, or 2 or 3 times a month, and in my case, two or three times a week.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some sentimentality in making it a monthly book. There was a lot of conversation amongst me, my team, my agent about like, should this be an OGN? Should this be a monthly series? for me, one of the reasons I decided to make the book is because there's so few Latinx representation in comics,
Right.
especially in the direct market. So somebody who mostly reads comics in the direct market and grew up with that, that was kind of where the direction that I wanted to go in with my first book. We'll see how that continues beyond this book. It may prove to have been the better choice to go OGN with it, and that might be what I do moving forward. But at least for this first book, I wanted to, kind of honor, I guess, where I came from in my journey with comics, and give something to the direct market that I didn't think was there before. So we'll see. I'm going to let you know. I'm going to keep you updated on how the numbers look and what the general consensus is.
Yeah, I am one of those. I like to say I'm like a Rain Man in comics. Someone who knows too much about this stuff when it comes to like monthly sales. Your natural attrition, which you and I are going to expect a
Yep.
very big first issue launch.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we pray, and then a 50 to 60% drop because
Hopefully
there
that's it.
are. Yeah, I mean, it could be more, worst
Yeah.
case scenario, but a couple of things we learned in 2020 was a bulk of the comic book shops in this country are in California. So when the pandemic started, California was one of the first states to shut down. I think before New
Mhm.
York. I might be wrong.
Probably, yeah.
Um, and then Diamond was like, uh-oh, nearly 50 to 60% of our business is shut down.
Yeah.
And you have 21 on average Diamond accounts, which I've been told that's, who knows. Um, yeah, that's a good question. We just got a question from a retailer,
Mm.
Matthias from Nowhere Comics, who does an awesome Saturday night live Facebook live show where Matthias and everyone in his shop they sell some really good stuff. I've been recollecting a lot of old Spider-Man comics that I've seen in books
Nice.
or I've seen covers that I've never got to own. So I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, how do we
Nice.
fight that? Yeah, that's a good question. Let's start with that. I mean, what are I know I have plans,
Yeah.
and I can go first if you want. But when you have a big first launch of a comic, how do you keep people interested for issue 2?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this just to preface it. This is for me at least as a first time creator putting out a book. This is just theory, based off of what I've seen other creators saying. But I think for me, little things like having in the back of the issue when it shows the next issue, having just a really strong setup where it has the dates of every issue. I think for a lot of people, and me included as a reader, it takes a little digging in and searching to figure out when the next issue of a book I'm into is. And I think there's no reason
Yeah,
why that shouldn't be in the comic itself. Why it shouldn't say, okay, I'm a 5-issue miniseries. This is the date that every issue of my 5-issue miniseries is going to be coming out, so that and you see it as sort of a checklist. Um,
interesting.
so that's a little thing, right? But I think
Right.
also it's trying to keep press going throughout it. Obviously, exclusive looks at the first few pages are most common in the first issue. But I think there's no reason why we can't find even smaller sites that might be interested in doing things like that too. So for me, I think it's just trying to keep press going and trying to keep the readers that you do have informed as to when, the next issue is, how they can keep up to date with you and the other things that you're doing. And thank you,
Right.
Lewis. I just saw that comment. Thanks for pre-ordering.
Yes. Lewis, huge advocate for LGBTQIA and people of color in comics.
Awesome.
I've known that kid. Funny story. There was a going away party for one of our mutual friends in Tucson, Arizona, Jean Pierre, who was a huge supporter of me and comics in general. It was at like an Indian restaurant, and Lewis and I had showed up, and I forgot my wallet or my debit card. A classic Henry move. If you're ever trying to not pay for dinner, no, I'm kidding. I would never do that. But I forgot something, and Lewis had purchased a beer for me and he wasn't even of drinking age. So I
Wow.
will never forget that.
Nice. Thanks for
The
pre-ordering those.
Indian oven, and thanks for pre-ordering. Yeah. So what I'm doing, I think, is something similar. What I want to do is I want to get an Excel spreadsheet of retailers that want to get published their information where they can get Helm Greycastle in the book for issue 2, because issue 1 of Helm Greycastle is 40 pages long, because it's 20 pages of interior art with another 10 pages. Well, I think 20 pages or 19 pages of RPG. And what the reason why I put the RPG in the comic is to expand past comic book shops, and hopefully gaming shops would be interested. That was the thinking behind that. Yeah. But also doing I'm going to try to do weekly interviews that are live, where I don't have to spend any time editing, and where I talk to people like you, and we promote each other, and we talk about projects that I'm interested in, where I don't have to fake any interest in someone's book that I don't care about, which what I would normally do at a con, which
For sure.
I can't wait for cons.
Yeah.
And when we first met, was the first time media at New York Comic Con?
Yeah, it was New York.
Yeah, where I used to like to host a conversation about, which is something I want to get into with you, is how to write people of color and LGBTQIA characters, because I think more than ever, I'm watching a show called Succession. I'm getting the DVDs from the library, and
Cool.
I don't care if there is a single person of color in that show. I just love the writing and not that I don't care. The question hasn't popped up. I'm not wondering about representation in this, because I'm going in. I went into it blind, and so engrossed with it. But what happens a lot of times in this industry, in the comic book industry at least, is we see people that aren't Latinx or aren't Black or people of color or LGBTQ writing characters and giving us their perspective of what these people might be. And it's not impossible to do it. It's not, knowing you're not there's like no rule against it.
Yeah.
But I know you're, a Latinx writer, and you're writing about an experience, and please talk about the story of Home, an experience of border crossers from Mexico, I'm from Tucson, Arizona, which is an hour away from the border. I've had family that we've had to pick up, that we've, had cross many times. So it's an important and sensitive subject to me personally. So, what is your experience behind that, and if any, and what kind of research did you do?
Yeah, for sure. That is an experience that is not my own. It's an experience that so we can go back for a second to your point about shows like Succession, right? And about non Latinx writers writing Latinx characters. I think that we need to, obviously we should be writing our own stories, especially when it's sensitive issues. But I think we should also be encouraging other people to write characters that are Latinx, because we want that representation. It can't just be whenever we write our own stories that we get, movie parts or representation in comics. We need to be able to see it from anyone. But I think the most important thing behind that is research, which you mentioned. So for Home, just the quick elevator pitch on it. It's about a young boy who is separated from his mother at the border just as superhuman abilities begin to emerge inside of him. So obviously the book is inspired by real events, by the family separation crisis. For me, two things kind of started happening at the same time for me. I was thinking a lot about the lack of representation in comics for Latinx characters and creators. And I was learning about family separation for the first time, along with everybody else, when the news broke about it. And it's something that despite how cynical my personal views might be about the way that this country treats immigrants, has treated immigrants and Latinx people, family separation was kind of a step further than that. A step further that even my cynicism didn't prepare me to feel as heartbroken as I did about. So thinking about these two things at the same time, I decided that home is kind of the reason why I started writing comics. Obviously, if you're familiar with me, you know that this isn't like the absolute first thing that I've put out. I've put out some mini comics. I have a graphic novel coming out from Harper Alley in a few years that's been written for a while now. But this is why I kind of taught myself to write comics. But a big part of this was research. And even before I decided to write this comic, I had already become, I guess for lack of a better term, like obsessed with this issue and what was happening. And reading as much as I could about it, listening to interviews with families that were separated and who, mothers who couldn't find their children. They had no idea where their kid was because they were shipped off to some other center in another part of the country. Seeing videos of kids who didn't recognize their parents after being away from them for a few months. So it was something that really, so my background, I didn't really talk about it. But my family is Cuban and Colombian. So Cuban refugees on one side and undocumented Colombian immigrants on the other side from my grandparents. So, two very different migration experiences within, the Latinx community, but also not one that crosses the southern border. So like I said, a lot of this was research. It was research heavy. And it was really heartbreaking to do all this research. And, I found myself pouring a lot of that into the book, and everything that you see in this book is all based off of reality, with the exception of the superpowers, obviously. But every situation in the book, I think about a third of the way through is when you see Juan and Mercedes, the boy and his mother, at a DHS facility, and they're seeing all sorts of things happen around them. They're seeing people being separated from their children through coercion. They're seeing a baby taken off of its mom's breast. They're seeing all sorts of things happen around them until they inevitably get separated. And this is all based off of real stories that I've read or listened to interviews of. So, I think with me writing this story and with anybody else writing stories with Latinx characters, the research is the most important part.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I've learned in writing in general is you're never going to be, your reader is always going to be smarter than you. Like someone's going to pick this up and they're going to find something wrong with this. Like
For
in
sure.
and that's what that was one of the fears I had with writing La Voz de Mayo, because every piece of research that I had, every answer I had asked another question. It was always like I had to stop and move on. I had to say, I had to remember the story, the story I'm trying to tell, the message I'm trying to convey is the most important thing. And
Definitely.
with Home, I love the ending of this book. I mean, I wish you didn't have to give it away in your pitch to sell it, because to sell this book, you have to do everything you can. But by the time you get to that last page, you're just like, oh, cool, I can't wait for issue 2.
Yeah. And I think, that's the thing about the book is that it's not about the superpowers. The superpowers are, you can say it's a metaphor for the lack of control that he has over his own life, and the way that his powers manifest themselves show that. And it's also, I wanted to write a book that was, to my point earlier about the direct market, that was something that was accessible to the direct market, but still gave me the opportunity to say what I wanted to say. But yeah, to your point, like the superpowers at the end are kind of like that twist. But it's not what the book is about. You know, the book is about survival. It's about hope. It's about what is your home when you know, you and your mother have gone to a new place, and then what is home when you're not even with your mother anymore and you're in a strange place. So yeah, I think you know, I think the at the end of the day, like these are all just genres that we're playing with, but at the end of the day, the story, to your point, is what's most important.
Right. One of the things I think that's really difficult for me is once you know and you do all this research about a certain thing, it kind of haunts you and follows you forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, specifically with home, the border crisis is nothing new. I mean, it predates us to the 80s. It's a fear and reality that we've, you know, at least people like myself had to live with. You know, my father was from Juarez, Mexico. It wasn't until recently he got his citizenship. He was very scared of getting arrested and he didn't have any tattoos. He used to wear American flag. I mean, he's like the most Mexican looking guy dressed as like an AC/DC roadie. You know, it was just like someone who
Yeah.
you just like, you know, it was like Born in East LA, you know, these guys like learning. Have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, you can't write this book until you've seen Cheech Marin's Born in East LA, my friend.
Yeah, I gotta check it out.
Yeah, no, it's a great story about, you know, Cheech and are you familiar with Cheech and Chong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so Cheech, he's an American citizen, gets shipped back to Mexico, and he has to work his way back to get a green card, and he's teaching all these Asian people how to
Mm-hmm.
be Mexican.
Nice.
And I mean, it probably doesn't age well. Probably a lot of homophobia and weird, you know, 90s,
Probably. Yeah.
you know, tropes, but
Yeah.
a funny movie. At least
Yeah. No,
I mean,
I'm always surprised when I see them pop up in something. I was watching After Hours for the first time, the Scorsese movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And
no.
they have a really small role in it, but I was just like, wait a
Oh,
second.
really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd never
I'd
think
love
they'd
to
be in a
check that out.
Scorsese movie, but yeah.
Hey, Marty Scorsese needs a laugh, you know, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that's where he got that from. We got a comment from Luis, and hey, if you're watching, you want to drop a comment, I'll put it up on the screen as long as it's not, you know, horrible. Yeah, I mean, in Tucson, I got pulled over a bunch of times, you know. And what I respect about you, Julio, is you have published a lot of free comics.
Yeah.
And you've paid out of pocket. You paid me to letter a story, which
Yeah.
that's how we met. And when I got the story in the script, I was like, this motherfucker's writing about the desert that I'm from. Like, who is this motherfucker? You
Yeah.
know? And but you know, when I got to know you and I got to see where your heart is, I respected it. I think one of the biggest, I think, like during the pandemic last year, you put out a short story about people, the discrepancies of where you live in New York and
Mm-hmm.
how the quarantine was being policed.
Policing it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a book called Between Two Worlds, which I did with Jacoby Salcedo, who is a very frequent collaborator of mine. And you know, it was, I think, early May, late April, whenever it started getting warm for the first time in New York,
I remember.
last
Yeah.
year. And you know, we were seeing all sorts of images. Obviously, lockdown had already started, but we were seeing all sorts of images of people in the East Village just like going to parks, no distancing, obviously, no masks. Obviously, we're talking about white people in general. And then we were also seeing images up in Harlem of you know, Black kids, Latinx kids being harassed by the police. Kids that were wearing masks, you know, kids that were wearing gloves, you know, back when gloves was a thing that
Yeah.
we all did.
I'm still a
And
Gloves fan.
yeah,
Oh
You know,
yeah.
it's funny. I haven't gotten. I tend to get sick pretty often, and this is the longest period of time I've gone without getting sick at all. You
Same.
know, so like
I get sick
all
once a
these,
year.
yeah. But yeah, so we were, you know, I was seeing these things on the news and on social media, and it just hit me like, you know, obviously New York, like I'm sure LA, are cities where there's huge disparities in white communities versus communities of color, and the way that police interact with people is totally different. In those same videos where we would see, you know, all these white people just congregating, acting as if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, you'd see cops handing out masks, you know,
Oh
which
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
which like, great. I 100% encourage that. You know, I think that's what we should be using cops for during that time. But when you contrast that with the way that they were treating people up in Harlem, in Spanish Harlem, that's when we see the real disparity.
Oh
So you know
yeah.
that comic came together within a week, you know, and obviously you're a comic creator. To some people that might not sound too quick, but you know, for anything in comics, that's like an extremely quick turnaround.
Oh yeah.
But you know, I wrote it was I think a 6-page mini comic maybe, but I wrote that within a day, and then I just sent it to Jacoby, and we'd been texting. I was like, "Look, I think I want to do this mini comic, and I think we need to get it up right away." And then he did it within like 5 days, and then we had Hassan, who letters most of our things, letter it a day after that, and then we just threw it online. And it got a, you know, the reception was bigger than any of the other mini comics I've put out, because I think it
Yeah.
resonated with a lot of people with what they were seeing.
Yeah, and we're all home, you know.
Yeah.
It's easier to catch things, I think, than a year ago. We were all just really staring at our phones, watching the world, you know, on pause. So
Yeah.
I was very, very excited about that story, and very glad that you were able to have that quick turnaround. You're right. I mean,
Yeah.
making a comic is not easy for anybody, especially within 7 days. And the big thanks to Tony Fleece. A little slighted that he didn't put a preview of my book in his book, but that's okay.
what
Previous.
what book is this?
Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's his new book that got optioned to be a movie.
Say it again. Did you say
There's
Stray Dogs?
yeah,
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
yeah. Your the preview of your book is in his book.
That's super exciting. I had no idea. Thank you, Tony, for
Yeah,
doing that and for
thanks,
letting me
Tony.
know. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to pick it up now. It's funny.
No,
I've
you
been
don't worry about it. Don't pick it up.
no, it's funny, man. I've been since, like I said, this is my first book. I've been picking up anything that has like any material of it. I've bought like the 2 previews catalogs that have come out with it so far.
Oh wow.
You know, my friend, I think you know him, Johnny Christmas. His book Tartarus had an ad in the back of it. So you know, anytime I hear that any of the Image books have it, I'm definitely grabbing them and putting them in a pile of, you know, mementos. So I'm excited.
I yeah, Johnny Christmas is one of the nicest guys I've ever met, with the coolest names.
Yeah,
Uh,
really cool
yeah,
guy.
yeah. Thanks, Tony. I'll remember that. You're on the list, buddy. Um, no, it's. I mean, yeah. I mean, I am very excited that Helm Greycastle and Home are coming out in the same month. I think
Yeah,
it's
me too.
probably the first time in comic book history two Latinx creators
One
having a book.
publisher.
Yeah, one publisher.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful that Image is doing this. I think every publisher has a lot of work to do as far as representation, and I'm very excited for the future. I know there's more
yeah,
things coming out that we don't even know about. Um, yeah, so um, yeah, so what I know about you, which is very little,
okay,
Julio,
let's get into
and
it.
today we're gonna talk about, get to know each other. I
Yeah,
think is something we don't get to do at cons, unfortunately,
yeah, yeah,
because I'm so busy and you're busy, which I'm assuming you are at cons.
Mhm.
You have a music background.
Yeah. Yeah, so I came up, like we mentioned, I started in comics, maybe 2 years ago is when I put out my first mini comic. But before that, I'd really been dedicating most of my, time, money to music. I'm from Miami originally, so I came up in the South Florida hardcore and punk scene, playing in bands, going to
Wow, I can't even
shows.
imagine what that scene is like in Florida.
It's a funny scene, man, because it's a scene of love and just like people doing it because they love it, because there are no outside forces influencing that scene.
Yeah,
There are no touring bands making it all the way down to Miami. So, this like I think it's something that happens with a lot of kids getting into their local scene for the first time is maybe they go to a club show where, some big hardcore band or punk band is playing, and maybe they have an opener that's a local band that they fall in love with, and then they start researching that local band more, and they learn about the local scene, and they start going to shows. That
yeah.
literally doesn't happen in Miami, because it's
Wow.
so far down south.
Is it more prevalent in Gainesville then?
Yeah, so
Is
Gainesville is a
Gainesville close?
huge. No, it's not close. It's so Miami is South Florida. Gainesville is all the way up there near Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Um, so it's been so I haven't lived there for 10 years, but like I'm gonna say it's like a 12-hour drive. Um, but
Yeah.
Gainesville is a
So,
huge like city for bands. They have a huge local scene, and the fest is a huge music festival that bands from all over the country go to. Um, but yeah, so I came up in music, and as I got older, I decided that like this music thing isn't working for me personally, like playing in bands. So I started
oh,
a
so you're a
label.
musician.
Yeah, I played drums in a bunch of bands growing up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, started in like school band, playing in jazz band, then moved into like punk and hardcore bands. And then when I saw that like, I'm not good enough to like be 21 and still playing in a band, like my level of like musicianship is not there. I decided to
Was your
start put
passion there though?
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I didn't drop off. I started a record label just to put out like my friends' bands. And that eventually grew. It was a lot of like putting out cassette tapes and vinyl. And by the time I stopped the label, we were distributed by Warner Brothers, by Warner
Wow.
Music. And it wasn't a thing that I could live off of and do full time.
Right.
But like we'd put out a new record and we'd sell out of like 500 to 1,000 pre-orders. It was a pretty like decent thing. But then I decided that like I was investing so much time, energy, and money into other people's creativity. And I was kind of burnt out on it, and I thought
Hmm.
like I want to tell my own stories. I want to do my own thing. And that's when I kind of put that to the side and started, pursuing another crazy industry, comics. So,
You went from like a raft to a smaller raft.
yeah, I know, man. I know it's not super practical.
So, so you played drums. When I was a kid, I played the trumpet. I wanted to be the Mexican Louis Armstrong.
Nice.
They would have called me Dirty Satchmo.
I started on trumpet actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in symphonic band.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't. I wasn't good at reading music. I was better at
Yeah.
listening and repeating what I could hear.
Hmm.
And then I got dragged into drama.
Nice.
And I think, yeah, I wish I stuck with the music, because I
Hmm.
probably would have still been playing jazz, because I love jazz, big jazz fan.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
Um, so your transition into comics is only 2 years ago, and you already
Yeah.
have an agent, and you
Yeah.
already have a book with the third largest comic book publisher in North America. I don't know whether to congratulate you or hate you, Julio. It's
putting me on the spot, man.
That's
You know,
I mean, that's impressive. I'm very,
thank
I'm
you.
glad.
Thank you.
I'm jealous and angry, but I'm very impressed and glad that you can do this in this industry in that quick of time. Like,
Yeah.
how did you, what the hell? What gives you the right?
Yeah. I think so like a lot of what I did in music was all DIY stuff. Like
Right.
I mentioned that by the end we were distributed by Warner Music, which is, like they're not the biggest, but they're one of the biggest distributors. But like that, is if you know somebody, you can do that, and like you're putting out decent music. But really it was all a DIY thing. It was just me working with small bands, and literally like making an Excel spreadsheet with like every music blog and the contact emails. And if I had like any little fact I can throw in there to like, it's like, oh, we know this same person, or maybe they've posted about one of my bands before. So it was a lot of just like, street level, just DIY
Stalking.
stuff. Stalking. So that, I took those skills and brought them to comics. Um, but I think I got some really good advice from Ed Brisson early on, because I mentioned home was the idea that made me want to start doing comics. But now, I mentioned 2 years have passed, and now is when it's coming out. But I've had other things before. And his advice was to start off with mini comics, which is short stories, to like hone the craft and become a better writer and know how to like efficiently tell stories. Also about, financially, like being able to afford, like nobody should jump in and try to like finance a 12 issue series before they've done anything before.
Yeah.
So that
That's
was
my
part of it
favorite
too.
thing people do
Yeah.
when they are just starting out.
Yeah. I have
It's
a
like
100 issue, epic that I'm forming,
that
which
no
is
one's
crazy. Like
reading.
no,
Yeah.
yeah,
No one's
exactly. And
buying it. No one's reading it. I'm paying for it. I'm publishing it. I'm printing. It's just like,
yeah,
wow, all this for probably something that will never go anywhere.
yeah. But you know what, man? Like I also don't shit on those people because like they're doing it because they're
Yeah,
passionate
not
about
to
it.
their face.
Yeah. We'll do it here, you and I.
Yeah,
But no, his advice of starting with short comics was I think what made like all the difference in the world for me. And finding these short stories that I wanted to tell, that I could feasibly pay an artist to draw for me, and learn how to start collaborating with people, learn how to write comics, and get my foot into like this, this industry,
yeah.
um, and get to know people. So like, my first comic was called Agent Mejia. And it was a 10-page comic about a Latinx ICE agent who, most people, I don't think most people are aware because most people are learning about ICE for the first time in the last couple of years. But ICE is an organization that, for better or for worse, didn't mostly go after immigrants. They did a lot of things with, like human trafficking in the US, like sex crimes, and that kind of thing. So this is a story about an agent that was mostly involved in that level of working at ICE. And then at the turn of the presidential election, and this is kind of like I mentioned before, most of the things I write are based off of like real events and research that I've done. His unit of tracking like child smugglers is disbanded, and he's sent to start doing deportations and removals. So he goes from doing something that he was really passionate about, that he felt was a good thing to do, to now deporting his own people. So this was a 10-page comic about like the way that affected that character, and like the journey that took him on. Um, and I did that with an artist whose art I really enjoyed. Actually, I'm sure you might have had experiences like this, but I went through a few artists. People
Oh
who I
yeah.
found on Reddit that ghosted me. People who told me they'd do it in a couple of
Pencil
months and then
Jack.
never. Yeah. So
DeviantArt.
like, yeah. So finally, I found Randy, and it worked out, and I put out this 10-page first comic, and I just reached out to people that I had met since I started like trying to learn more about like what does it look like to make my own comics, and I asked them to repost it, and slowly like doing this a few times, like putting out mini comics and asking my new friends that I've met to like share it, got me more followers, which is also, I think, like more confidence in yourself in writing because you get like really good feedback too. And then when it came time to write the book that I kind of started to do comics to write in the first place, I had some audience and my name wasn't just like a name that nobody knew. And I had comics out already that could prove that like I knew how to like I think the follow through from like idea to completed comic, even if it's just 5 pages or 10 pages, is a huge thing. Because who knows what the statistics are, but I'm sure a huge percentage of people that start with an idea never follow through and actually make a completed comic. So I
Yeah,
think
I
I think
mean,
that's a
that
big
is
thing.
definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna say who said this, but show business is 90% just showing up, you
Hmm.
know. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of things. Like having a name is really important,
Hmm.
you know. I'm lucky that I don't know why, but I've been writing and publishing what I think and stories I want to tell, and people pick them up.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky, and people
Yeah.
are, I think it's the boyish charm that I used to have, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. Julio,
I think
Luis is that? Oh, go ahead.
no, I'll answer his question in a second. I was just going to say, I saw somebody say once, and this is more about filmmaking, that the more granular you get in like a specific experience, the more people relate to it. And I think that that's something that both of us have done with our stories and our books. They're not written to please everybody,
Oh no,
and they're not written for like this huge audience. But I think that when we write for a very specific audience about very specific ideas, it just happens to also uh, get people interested in it in a way that they wouldn't if you were trying to write for the least common denominator.
right?
Um,
Yeah, I mean, La Voz de Maya was definitely about a man no one's ever heard of, about a town a lot of people don't really know about a particular Native American tribe that isn't like Hopi or Cherokee or Navajo. That was
mhm.
very, a very tight knit, small tribe. And I mean, it wasn't the biggest selling graphic novel, but it got out there, and I'm
You
very
found an
grateful.
audience, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And a lot
definitely.
of people, shared the story. I've seen it show up on tons of lists. I know libraries really got behind it, and I think because you can get into like a specificity that other people can't. And if you were trying to write, maybe a general book about, Native American tribes, and their, you know, people that worked and fighting for their civil rights, like it wouldn't be the same as as in the book that you did, which was like very specific.
Oh yeah, I wanted to
Yeah.
offer and tell a story that no one else could,
Yeah.
and I'm very lucky that my great grandfather was much more interesting than anything I could come up with.
So Lewis is asking, how often did I post comics? So I posted Agent Mejia in May of 2019. That was the first comic I posted, and then The Price of Freedom was a comic I put out shortly after that, in sometime in the summer, maybe July or August, and then in the fall I put out another one called Unbow Your Head. So those were three, kind of spaced out, but I kind of thought about it the way that I thought about music marketing with bands, which was that you would put you wouldn't just drop an album. Beyonce can do that. Most people can't do that, and get all this interest in just dropping an album out of nowhere. You'd release singles in specific amounts of time. Like maybe every other month you'd put out a new single, and then eventually, you put out 3, 4 singles, and then you announce an album and you put out the album. So I took that same kind of mindset when it came to putting out my mini comics. So I put out in May, in July, and in October I put out mini comics, and then I did another one. The next one was Between Two Worlds in May of the following year. So there was a significant amount of time between that, but that's also when I started pitching home to publishers.
Well, let's talk about home. Let's
Yeah,
talk about who's you're writing, who's drawing, who's
yeah,
coloring, who's editing. When
yeah.
does it come out?
So it comes out April 14th. First, I almost said April 28th because I was seeing the date there.
Oh,
But I wrote
that's
it.
why I put it there.
Yeah. Anna Weissachek drew it. Brian Valenza, who is your co-creator on Helm, Grey Castle colored it. Hassan Otsmain Allahu lettered it. And covers are by Lisa Sturl, and Jacoby Salcedo, who I mentioned, does all the B covers for the book.
So are you doing A and B for each issue?
Yeah, so every issue is going to have one cover from Lisa and one cover from Jacoby.
Wow.
Yeah, I tend to find some way to get Jacoby involved in like everything that I put out. So
that's great. You know, my best friend Christian Valer, I had him draw. We did a couple of comics together, so mainly anthologies. You know, I got that same advice as you did: do smaller stories, learn how to be competent in the industry, in storytelling and with your craft. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna tap Christian to draw something for Helm.
Nice.
So yeah, just
Nice.
it's yeah, no, you got. I mean, I think it's always great to respect people that have helped you come
Yeah,
up.
definitely.
You know, and be
Yeah,
there for
and
you.
Jacoby and I, you know, we've gotten really close. We did when I was talking about the mini comics, I met him doing Price of Freedom.
Mhm.
I had you know, I wish I could find the Twitter post, but I was searching through like, you know, and I've done this before to find artists. People do like hashtag hiring for comics. I essentially just searched that hashtag and started looking through artists. And I was super like his art style was super interesting to me. And I reached out to him, and it was a situation where I hired him because that's what I was doing at the time. I was just like, I'll give you money to draw my comic, you know? And that's what I did with Jacoby. And then we put together the pitch for Frontera, which is the book that you lettered the pitch for us, and Harper Alley, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, picked up. And he's drawing that book right now. It doesn't come out until summer 2023. But then we also did Between Two Worlds together, and we did a mini comic called Balseros also, which we made for like one of those make a comic in a week contests, which we lost. But then we just put it up. We just put it up for free, like all my other mini comics. So
there was a contest, and there was a
yeah.
winner.
Yeah, it was I think Platform Comics was the group that did it. And we were just like, you know, it was the pandemic, like we didn't have anything to do. We were like, fuck it, let's just make this comic, which was mostly just a debate, or not, it was a conversation between a father and a son. A Cuban American father and a son who are at the beach, and they see Haitians wash up on the shore in a raft, which is a very common occurrence in Miami, where I'm from. But if you're not, most people aren't familiar with like the protected class that Cubans have when it comes to immigration, which is pretty much, until recently, as long as you can get to the country, you are legal. Obviously not the same for anybody else.
No.
And in Miami, where you have immigrants from Cuba and Haiti predominantly coming in through the beach, it's again like that different disparity between the two people. And that comic was mostly just a conversation where the father explained to the son, who was nervous and afraid of seeing these migrants coming up on the shore, explaining to them how they're no different than him when he came on a raft to Miami as well. But yeah, so we just made that just for fun and decided like we'll submit it to this contest. And then, you know, they did like a top 10. We didn't even make it to the top 10. So we just put it up for free. So, you know, it's all good.
I do not
made a
compete in contests. I hate contests. I'm yeah, no, can't do it.
Yeah, that was the one and only time. Yeah. Oh, and FOC for home is tomorrow, Monday.
That's why we're doing this.
Yep. Yep.
For your consideration, FOC, and here's another weird jargon. A final order cutoff is a term for comic book retailers. So Julio mentioned previously that you have all the previews magazines, and I have one. Here, I'll grab it. Give me oh no,
Cool.
no, it's a giant phone book. It's literally a phone book of, and it's like you flip it. One half is comics. All the comics are coming out through most of the major publishers, and smaller publishers and offshoot publishers. And then you
Mhm.
flip it, and it's toys and apparel and collectibles and stuff.
Yeah.
And so comic book stores tomorrow have to decide the certain amount of titles that are going to be available this week, and put in their last number of how many books they want shipped to them. And the book can come in pristine condition or it can be in pieces. So we're
Yeah.
hoping that all the comic book stores that pre-order your book, get them in one piece, and they order up, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, now that you had told me why you're doing monthly, or we like a monthly series, seeing a book with brown people on the shelves, I think is a good thing, and it's an important thing. Um, but next time you do something like this, please talk to me, or go
Yeah.
straight,
Yeah.
because I mean, the reason why I'm doing Helm Greycastle monthly is everyone kept saying, wow, Lavos was really, or they hated it, loved or hated Lavos. They were like, when's the next time you're going to do a biography or something about a Latinx person of interest? And so I was like, oh, okay, I found an audience, but I don't want to be that guy. And Helm Greycastle was a left turn of that, but also still in the same lane. Did you have a chance to look at it before we talked?
I
I know I
did.
just sent
Yeah,
it to you.
man. No, I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot, and I'll tell you this, I'm not a fantasy fan at all.
What?
You know,
What?
I
Wow.
know, man. Like, look, I watched Game of Thrones because my wife and I did like a trade on. She would watch a show that I wanted her to watch, and I would watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I was not into it at all for the first few episodes, and then I was
Wow.
in, and luckily I watched it. I started watching it, I think, like 6 months before the last season started. So I kind of
Okay.
missed out on all those gaps that everybody else experienced.
Yeah.
But really, I'll say like Game of Thrones is the only fantasy I've enjoyed, and I really liked your comic a lot. I thought it
Oh,
was
thank
really,
you.
really cool.
Thank you.
I can't imagine
Send your
reading any other.
Venmo. I'll make sure you get paid for that.
Yeah, I really like the little girl a lot. I thought she was super funny.
Oh, good.
I thought she was awesome.
The Yeah, like people kept asking me when I was gonna, because I have a background in stand-up comedy, and they were
Mhm.
like, when are you gonna do a funny comic? And I was like,
Yeah.
it's hard to do funny in comics,
Yeah.
because there's a pacing, there's a structure of how we talk, but there's a structure of how we write in panels.
Mhm.
And yeah, I wanted her to be funny, and I wanted it to have jokes throughout it. And um, one of my only regrets about issue one is we're introducing we're introducing the world. We're prepping
Mhm.
people for what we're gonna see. In issue two, there's a lot more Mesoamerican world building,
Cool.
and we're in it. And I'm excited for people to see it, because there's been so much research done on how people dressed and talked and walked and
Nice.
roles, and I'm really excited for all the historians to come out and say that's not right. And but
Yeah.
this is also an alternate reality where the
Yeah, you can do
Spanish
whatever you want.
one, yeah, and there's a merge. People like merge the two languages, and
Mhm.
which happened in real life. And I'm sure people are going to be asking, how do these Mexicans or Aztecs know common? And it's like, well, learning a language is not that hard,
Yeah.
and I can't wait to as you've seen in the comments for your book, see what people have to say.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, man. So obviously with FOC coming up, Image has been posting about it more than I don't think they'd posted about it on their social media until the last few days, and Instagram and Facebook in particular. It's a lot. I think Instagram had like 200 comments last time I saw it, and Facebook had like 100 something. And man, people are like, it's wild to me how triggering this book can be to people.
Oh yeah.
When all they read was a solicitation. And like there's people having full-on debates about asylum versus so-called illegal immigrants. Like, it's insane, man. Like, it's crazy how just the idea of a comic that includes characters that seek asylum and are separated from their families, which is a real thing that has happened, how triggering that can be to people, and how many comics about or comments about oh, I guess Image doesn't make any good books anymore, or when did Image get so woke, or it's
I
just like,
love those
it's
comments.
wild, man.
Yeah. No, and well, I guess something to but one of the last topics we can leave off on, there is like a discussion happening about the new administration, the Biden administration, that really campaigned on no more deportations within the first 100 days, and we've seen, if not more, deportations. And just today, there was an interesting article that I had read before we started talking about how the border is being more friendly or more understanding with children and families, but people that are coming on their own are still getting turned away. And we're seeing a record increase of people coming back. And it's funny how there is the conservative point of view of, well, Biden is opening up the borders for these people. And then the reality of Biden still keeping the previous administration's implementations that got even more extreme, even while Obama's administration, which he was known within our community as a deporter in chief.
Yep.
So, as it is heartbreaking, but also I'm not surprised that this the Biden administration and campaign had fought for our vote and had promised certain things like no deportations within the first 100 days. And we're, seeing that all over again. And then what I wanted to say before was, how does it feel to open that Pandora's box, know about everything that's happened, and to see it completely and seeing it happen now? Is that something that you wrestle with, or something that, I mean, how do you, like, even while writing the book, I don't know, is the book finished?
Yeah, the book is finished. I finished it early last year. So it's been written.
Is it so it's drawn and everything?
Oh, the 5th issue we're halfway through inks on the final issue. So it's been written and it's pretty much almost done being created. But it's interesting, man, because like I wrote this obviously inspired by and during the Trump administration. It was initially going to come out during the Trump administration, but COVID pushed it back. So it got delayed.
And one of the most beautiful things about this is, this could have been pushed out a year from now, it still would have been relevant.
That's the thing, man. Like, I think that's the thing about the unfortunate and sad truth about anything regarding immigration, or really anything talking about, the Latinx experience and, the way that we're treated by the federal government, is that you can watch a movie from like the 90s, like El Norte, or you can read this book or anything that's come out ever since, and we're hitting on the same themes. things have changed. I think things have become much more cruel, much more cruel. And we're able to see a lot more than we did before, just because of technology. But unfortunately, these issues persist. Obviously, we're seeing the Biden administration. I think the more nuanced take on this is that there's two different things happening. The deportation conversation is something that, for me, when I read about it and I do research on it, post-Trump, it's more about ICE being a rogue organization that does whatever they want, and Biden literally has no control over. And I think just has given up on trying to control them. And then there's the border, which is Biden leaving a lot of Trump's policies in place. And like you mentioned, I think there's a lot of talking points on the right about how it's open borders. In the reality, we see that it's just a lot more of the same on the border. It's just my most cynical take is that this is what politics is, and this is what politicians are. I think that it's a tough situation because we weren't going to vote for Trump again. It's not like there was nothing that Trump could say that would have gotten my vote.
Right.
And without simplifying it to the better of the two evils, I think like there needs to be a huge overhaul over what departments of the government are in charge of deportations, who has power over it, who's in the positions of power to listen to someone like Biden. Because from what we're seeing now, Biden said 100 days, no deportations. They kept deporting. He, from what I've read, tried to push back and then just gave up because his administration saw that they have no power over this agency. And look, at the end of the day, I mean, I think every single person, nobody wants to come here undocumented. Like nobody wants to sneak around, be looking, behind their backs their whole life. I think we need to, like, my personal opinion on all this is that we need to make the process so much easier and cheaper for people to do, for everybody who wants to come. And it can't, it's so restrictive. It's so difficult. My grandparents, on the Colombian side of my family, it took them forever to get their papers straight. Like I'm sure you talked about your dad, so you know about this too, but like, it shouldn't be this difficult, for hardworking people who are paying taxes already, and not getting any of the benefits from it. Like, it's a lose-lose, I think, for everyone. But it keeps this boogeyman of undocumented immigrants who want to steal your job, who are quote unquote lazy. It keeps that in their back pocket, which I think is more valuable to them than actually helping people.
Definitely. Julio, please end with where we can find you. When is Homecoming out?
Yeah. So on all social media, Julio Anta is my name and my handle and everything. Also julioanta.com. You can read, I think, like 5 mini comics there. I have links on places you can pre-order home. But like we said, tomorrow is FOC. So if you have a local comic shop, definitely hit them up. Let them know you want a copy. But it'll also be on Comixology. There's some comic shops you can mail order from. But yeah, definitely pick up the book if you can.
Julio, I've gotten to know you, and I feel so much closer now. And I just appreciate your time. I'm really excited about your book and the reception and the ruffling the feathers it's causing on the comment sections. And I'm really excited for you. And man, congratulations again.
You,
and
Thank
looking
you for having
forward
me
to.
on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and give my love to the family. I can hear him in the background.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, man. And anybody watching also, tomorrow we're going to have, I think like a 9-page preview of the first issue that you can check out.
Just giving it away for
online.
free, huh, Julio?
Man, that's how I do it, man. Try to give people as much for free. We'll see what comes back from it. But
That's
yeah,
great.
follow me on social media, and I'll post a link whenever it goes up tomorrow.
All right, man. Good to see you. Have a good rest of your
Cool.
Sunday.
All right, you too, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, please order Julio's book. It's going to be good. It's going to be fun. It's going to be heartbreaking. And it's important to see more Latinx comics creators, characters on the racks at comic shops. Because I know if I saw that as a kid, I would have lost my jelly beans, which I'm sure I had in my pocket back then. But yeah, so I'm gonna try to do this again. I'm gonna try to get Tina on. Tina Horn has a Safe for Sex Work Kickstarter out that I'm really into, and a book I'm really into. Check that out. Shout out to Rootless Coffee. I bought this. This is not a paid advertisement, but this is what I've been sipping on in my Hellboy mug. But yeah, Rootless Coffee, check them out. If you listen, I was on a podcast called Comics Inebriated with Liana Kangas and Matt Emmons, and we talked about Batman. And the previous podcast has a discount code for Rootless Coffee. And like I said, what I've been watching is Succession on DVD from the library. Support your libraries. And the next book I'm going to crack open is Black Panther Party by David Walker and Marcus Conway Anderson. Really excited to read this. Thanks for watching. Please pre-order Helm Greycastle. The FOC is April 5th. I thought it was the 25th. I got mixed up. Tell your comic book stores. There's a link for Collector's Paradise. If you could get all of cover A's, all the cover A's from 1 through 4, or cover B's 1 through 4 signed by me, I'll be going to their facility, signing comics safely with a mask. I don't see myself doing cons until 2022, unless I get a vaccine, which it doesn't look like I'll ever get that. But I'm excited. Fingers crossed. I'm Henry Barajas. You've been listening and watching Contrary to Henry. And I can't wait to see you again. And thanks for everyone watching and commenting. And I'll see you soon.